Thank you for... Thank you for the many kind introductions. I'm aware that every single speaker this morning has had an opposition blue bottle. Have you seen it?
Yes.
So I am fully prepared for the opposition from a blue bottle. When I was here last year, I fully expected, and Kevin, our brilliant organiser here, and of him we'll be talking later, not today maybe. I fully expected, he fully expected opposition from Dublin because it was promised. And they didn't turn up. And I assumed that it was simply because they didn't have the courage to face up to the raw Roscommon rustics that they would find here. But no, I think the opposition I was expecting today hasn't turned up for a reason, and I got an email from the League of Anarcho-Syndicalist Capitalism-Smashing Socialist Revolutionary Bolsheviks of Dorky, the Sorrento Terrace chapter. Myers, we are aware of the goings-on of your misogynist, racist, xenophobic capitalist coven, and we would definitely be there to silence you and all your hateful fascist rantings. But as it happens, today is our garden party. That is to say, the League of Anarcho-Syndicalist Capitalist Smashing Socialist Revolutionary Bolshevist Dorky, the Sorrento Terrace chapter. So let this be a warning, take us very seriously indeed. Our garden party begins with a talk from Mummy, who's a cordon bleu chef, and she'll be lecturing the revolutionary comrades on the art of making carbon-neutral, eco-friendly, vegan Molotov cocktails. And instead of using that nasty capitalist substance, petrol, Mummy is using cognac, preferably 1968 of the vintage that Declan was talking about. And the wonders about cognac, it is purely vegan and doesn't involve the burning of fossil fuels. Armagnac will do at a pinch. And later, Daddy will be using his own helicopter to show us how to rescue comrades from a capitalist jail. And that's why we haven't got any opposition here today, apart from a blue bottle. Now, you know, and we all know, that the left in Dublin, the liberal left, knows nothing about the Ireland that's visible here today. They know nothing about the world you inhabit. They know nothing about the morals that drive you. And they are an internally looking group that has no regard for other people's ethics and other people's beliefs. And I'm here today to talk to you about the death of the media, but as Declan said, it's not just the media that is suffering, it's not just the media which is failing. We are seeing a general collapse in the values of our institutions at university level, at political level, and at every other level. Death, when it occurs in an organism, occurs at many levels. Respiration ceases, cerebral activity ceases, and zombification or parasitation occurs. When death occurs, tissues break down. The abdomen becomes the lungs. Brain tissue drips out of the ears. And people don't know what once was. They can't recognize what once was. So that within the media, people no longer recognize, no longer observe the proper margins and the proper boundaries of existence. And newspapers don't even remember what they're supposed to be there for. Last September, the Irish Times had on its front page A headline that must set standards for grossness, indecency, for political revoltingness without precedent. It was about the president, the vice president of the United States of America. And the headline was, "How Mike Pence Shat on the Carpet in Ireland's Spare Room." This is the Irish Times talking about the vice president of the United States of America, which is Ireland's biggest investor. Now, numbers of things you could say about that. You know that the Irish Times would never speak of a woman like that. It would never speak of a Muslim like that. It would never speak of an African like that. It would never speak of any EU official like that. That wasn't even vulgar abuse. That was a direct and explicit insult. It was a refutation of all the standards, not merely that the Irish Times had been representing for many decades, but it was a refutation and a rejection of the values of Irish life. Deliberate, studied, intended. That headline would have gone through every editorial level. It would have been discussed in conference. It would have been agreed by the editor, by the chief sub, by the news editor. This was an insult not merely to the United States of America, its presidential system. It was an insult to the American people and to this country's largest investor. Which tells me this is dysfunctional behavior. That ordinary rules of conduct, apart from those that we apply to ourselves, the other rule of conduct about survival. Where does our investment come from? What jobs are we going to give to our children? Those rules are now put in abeyance. They no longer count. And as barriers break down, people don't realise in the different parts of the newspaper what their job is. A headline earlier on this month was on the sports pages of the Irish Times, "White Lives banner mars Manchester City win." Above Burnley football ground, somebody had flown a banner saying White Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter would have been fine, clearly. White Lives Matter is offensive and it mars the sporting occasion. So when this happens, you have to realise that we're in new territory. Now, the other day, this appeared on the sports pages of the Irish Times. I'm reading from it verbatim, so I'm not mistaken. By a columnist in the Irish Times. I'm not going to name the columnist. Speaking of white racism in America, the columnist said, racism was now widespread. It was being effectively supported by the most powerful man on earth, President Trump. Police brutality towards black men, women and children had reached breaking point. George Floyd was just going to a shop. Michael Brown said, "Hands up, don't shoot." Philando Castile was just driving home with his girlfriend. Eric Garner had just broken up a fight. Alton Sterling was selling CDs. Ezel Ford was just walking in his neighbourhood. Sandra Land had just been pulled over. Natasha McKenna was in the middle of a schizophrenic episode. Freddie Gray had his neck broken while being arrested. A decade of watching black people die, no justice, no peace. In the days of the internet which has done so much damage to the fabric of our civilization and our values, it is quite easy to trace the details of these tragic cases, and they are all tragic. George Floyd, whose death we all saw, and it is unspeakable, utterly inexcusable. But he wasn't just going to a shop. He was a career criminal who had been imprisoned for sticking a pistol into the belly of a woman, a pregnant woman. He had just passed a $50 note, and of the 4 police officers who arrested him, 2 were Asian, 1 was a white man whose name we all know, Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, and the 4th was mixed race. This is not a white racist crime against a black man. He was murdered. No doubt about that, but it wasn't a racist crime. Michael Brown said, "Hands up, don't shoot." This has been repeatedly said in the Irish Times. It's even been repeated in an editorial. Michael Brown had just stolen a box of cigars from a shop owned by a Korean immigrant. He's 6'5", that is to say nearly 2 meters tall, 250 pounds, 120 kilograms. He walked down the main street, a police car stopped. Driver lowered the window. Brown reaches in to grab his gun. Doesn't get the gun, he runs away. The police officer gets out of the car and calls on Brown to stop. Brown stops and charges at her. The one eyewitness to testify to all the details on this is a black woman who doesn't like the police. But she gave this evidence. Brown, 6'5", nearly 2 meters, 250 pounds, 110 kilograms, charges right at the police officer. The police officer shouts to stop. He doesn't stop. The police officer shoots him 5 times. The black woman, who doesn't like the police, was asked by the FBI, could this have been prevented? She said yes, only if Brown had obeyed the police officer. The FBI had a comprehensive investigation on this shooting in Missouri, Ferguson, Missouri. It covers 6,000 words, 6,000 pages, I'm sorry. There has scarcely been a more comprehensive investigation into any killing in American life. Philando Castile, who was just driving home with his girlfriend, he was murdered, as far as I can see. He was shot by a Hispanic policeman called Geronimo Llanes, who was charged with second-degree murder and incomprehensibly freed, but he wasn't the victim of a white man. Eric Garner had just broken up a fight. He seems to have been killed unjustifiably on the ground by a neck hold, but the arresting officer was Sergeant Kitty Adonis, who is a black police woman. Exile Ford was just walking in his neighborhood, so he was shot wrong. He shot, but he was shot by an Asian police officer and a Latino police officer. Sandra Bland had just been pulled over, later committed suicide in the prison cell. Who pulled her over? It was Brian Encinia, a Hispanic who had issued 1,600 tickets in 12 months. Here we have a delinquent copper who was sacked. And they looked at the possibility of prosecuting him, and there weren't grounds. A bad policeman, and there isn't much worse than a bad policeman. Natasha McKenna was in the middle of a schizophrenic episode. She was indeed. This is, of all the cases we're talking about, this is one of the most tragic. She was schizophrenic, bipolar, paranoid. She had assaulted a police officer and was taken to a police cell, but it was rapidly realized she was too unwell to be held in a police cell. They sent people to move her, but she had removed her clothes and had soiled herself so comprehensively that they had to move in special officers in biohazard uniform, 5 special officers in biohazard uniforms. I have not seen the video footage of this. 3 journalists have, in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Chicago Tribune. All 3 of them have described, all 3 of them woke, all 3 deeply politically correct, all 3 described the attempt to control this woman. She was barking mad, deeply distressed, and very strong in the way that some people like that condition will be. She was 3 times warned that she would be tasered. She was then tasered on 3 occasions, and after the 3rd occasion, she was found to have died of a heart attack. And the final one, Freddie Gray, who had his neck broken while being arrested, according to the Times, in the report in the Irish Times. Actually, no, the neck was broken inside a police vehicle. He was causing trouble in Baltimore. He was arrested. The arresting officers were 6 police officers, 3 of them black, and one of those black police officers, one of the 3, was a woman. We don't have any evidence whatever of white crime against black people here. Yet, the Irish Times repeatedly has said, and other newspapers, however, you can see the same thing in American newspapers online, but repeatedly talk about the prevalence of white crime, white police officers attacking black people. I just want to give you some little statistics on this. One of the first casualties in St. Louis, Missouri, of the rioters after George Floyd was killed was David Dorn. He was minding a friend's pawnbroker shop in St. Louis, in a shopping mall. He was much respected in St. Louis Police because he was a former police captain. He had tutored and mentored that generation. He was a man aged 77. He tutored and mentored the entire police force of St. Louis. He was a black police officer, and he was mourned by John Hayden, Chief of Police of St. Louis, the fourth black man to be in charge of the police in the city. Just recently, Mayor Lori Lightfoot was deploring the violence that occurred in Chicago over July 4th weekend. And her complaints and denunciations of the violence were echoed by the Chief of Police, David Brown. What distinguishes both these people is that Lori Lightfoot is a black woman, Chief of Police David Brown is a black man. So there is no evidence that Chicago police are more inclined to be violent towards black men than there are white men on racial grounds. Indeed, Lori Lightfoot said, for black, you can get this online yourself, for black and brown men, their career path just seems to be wanted to focused on the street corner. Seattle is now on the headlines at the moment because of the events of the woke generation there. The Chief of Police there is Carmen Best, a black policewoman. And James Craig is the police officer in charge of the most turbulent city after Maryland and Chicago in the United States of America, Detroit, and James Craig is black. All the evidence you want that this is not a matter of white prejudice against black men is there in those statistics I've given you. There is the alternative view as well of what actually happens in American police forces. What you see, if you look at it closely, is ineptitude, bad training, overuse of guns. 1,000 people are killed every year by the American police, shot or killed during arrest. Every year, that's 1,000. Twice as many white men are killed every year as are black men. Twice as many. Now, to be sure, the black population is much smaller. And here it gets very difficult to discuss, but it has to be discussed because facts have to intrude upon any meditation on these matters. 53% of all homicides in America are performed by the male black population, which is 6.5%. 27% of all rapes in America are by the 6.5% male population, black population. Female black population is law-abiding. It's upwardly mobile. It achieves things, for the most part. We have a serious, complex problem which cannot be solved by simple slogans and mantras such as Black Lives Matter. They do matter. In Chicago, as I mentioned to you, the violence over Thanksgiving weekend, 87 people were shot. All of them were black. 17 of them were killed. All of them black. All of them by blacks. Of the 17 killed, 2 were children. Now, you didn't hear anything about that from the media, because the media is focused on priorities that are unrelated to the truth. And there are a number of things you could always say about the alternative view of the American police. Justine Damond, you can look at this up yourself on her when you get home, D-A-M-O-N-D. She called in the police in Minneapolis, the city where George Floyd was murdered. She saw there were strange noises out the back. Police go along to investigate. There's nothing there. They call in a sign, police code from their police car to headquarters, area or safe, no problem. Justine Damond comes out in her pajamas, barefoot, sees the police car outside the house, comes out, is everything okay? A black police officer draws his pistol and shoots her dead. You haven't heard about that. Daniel Shaver was in Dallas. He's from Dallas, but he was in Arkansas. He was in his hotel room. Some trouble in somebody suspected they saw a gun there. Daniel Shaver is called out of his hotel by a police officer called Philip Brailsford. Philip Brailsford seems to me to be a 24-carat psychopath. He orders Daniel Shaver to get down on the carpet, and you can see this yourself at home. Look it up. S-H-A-V-E-R, Daniel Shaver. And he said, crawl towards me. And Daniel Shaver is weeping with terror because he knows he's been confronted by a psychopath. He's got an armor-light rifle with him. The length of the corridor is here to that second post. And as he crawls towards him, Philip Brailsford puts 5 armor-light rounds into his head and to his chest, killing him instantly. He was charged with murder and was acquitted. Incredibly. You can see that yourself. Sitting on your head, on somebody, restraining somebody by the use of the neck hold. Well, we all know about the Minneapolis one, but we didn't hear about one in Paris in January. Cedric Chouviat, he's 42 years of age, or was 42 years of age. Police officer sat on his neck and he said, "I'm suffocating, I can't breathe." They sat on his neck for 15 minutes until he was dead. Why have you not heard about that? Because he's a white man. So too was Tony Timper, August 2016, 4 years ago. He rang in from the local shopping mall to say he was in trouble, he was causing trouble to himself, he's overweight, he's got mental problems. Will the police car come and rescue him? By the time the police car has arrived, Tony Timper had been put in handcuffs by the local security company. That's America, I can't explain that to you. The policeman turn, make him lie down on his belly, face to the side. He's 30 stone. One police officer sits on his back and stays there for 15 minutes until he too is dead. No outcry. Why? Because he's a white man. Now, obviously, this is bad police behaviour, but it's not necessarily racist. See, what we've got is a set of values that don't apply either to the truth, which is important, or our own self-interest, which is equally important. I didn't know until today that we have a slogan, an officially backed slogan: if you're Irish, you can't be racist. Or if you're racist, you can't be Irish. That's racist. That's racist. To say that the Irish are defined by some quality that no one else has. That we're above the ordinary human emotions that define every single race in the world. And everyone in this tent knows that racism is stupid and wrong and counterproductive and causes nothing but unhappiness. But if you espouse an empirical untruth as a statement of national identity, and it is accepted, then you can accept any other kind of untruth and be accepted. You know, the defining issue of the Third Reich wasn't how it finished, it was how it began, when they started murdering the mentally unwell. That was when the techniques of the final solution were pioneered. Well, you can't shoot them all, but you put them into a van and connect it with carbon dioxide, and they just sort of die. Well, the first Jews after that very successful experiment in which 50,000 people were, harmless people were murdered, then the Jews are put in comparable vans. In fact, they used medical specialists, not the SS, to begin the murder of Jews. So these things have tiny, tiny beginnings. And from those toxic seeds grow vast and poisonous oak trees. In 2017, Islamic terrorists bombed a Coptic cathedral in Egypt, killing 44 people. The Irish Times didn't mention it. In 2018, in the Philippines, Islamic terrorists bombed Mount Carmel Cathedral, killing and injuring 120 people. the Irish Times didn't mention it, ever. On the equally abominable Christchurch shootings in New Zealand, in which 55 Muslims were killed, we all have the same opinion on this. It's completely wicked. There's no mitigation, nothing else to be said. I think the man who did it should be killed. I actually do believe that. The Irish Times has mentioned that 38 times. 2 slaughters of Christians, mass slaughters of Christians, not mentioned, visibly available online, and decisions were taken in the Irish Times not to carry it. I'm not talking about the slaughters in Nigeria. They number in the thousands. The abductions of young women, they number in the many hundreds. So I'm not talking about things that are difficult to discover. I'm talking about things that are online, which newspapers across Western Europe and North America choose not to report. Dead Christians, particularly if they're slightly brown, don't count. Dead Muslims across the world do count. In the 21st century, the Irish Times has mentioned Islamophobia 220 times. Islamophobia, an almost non-existent phenomenon in my life and in any representative or visible force in Ireland, 220 times. Islamic terrorism, 209 times. So the putative response to the real force of Islamic terrorism, which has killed many thousands of people, is mentioned more often than the original phenomenon. I should tell you as a background, Greta Thunberg has been mentioned 214 times, more often than Islamic terrorism. Greta Thunberg in itself, or as a phenomenon in itself, is worth a great deal of talk, which don't have the time to